Have you ever wondered how you would change your fate if you could live again? In this tale of magic, intrigue and reincarnation, Odette, the protagonist, has lived 5 lives, each ending in tragedy: burned, guillotined, hanged and stabbed to death. And all of this tragedy has to do with her stepsister, Rachel. While Rachel was Destiny's favorite, beautiful, elegant, and gifted, Odette was seen as a disgrace to the family, with a short temper, mediocre looks, and mediocre magical talent. In her 5th life, Odette decides to stop running away and abandoning herself to please Rachel. She begins to calmly observe everything around her and tries to change the trajectory of her destiny. However, the gears of fate seem to be predetermined, and no matter how hard Odette tries, Rachel's light still can't be hidden. Can Odette find her true self in this reincarnation full of jealousy, hatred and intrigue? Will her 5th life be her last? Follow Odette's footsteps into this world of magic and intrigue, and witness how she struggles to survive in the whirlpool of fate and find her own redemption. I was contemplating how I should spend my 5th life. Yes, my 5th life. I was living out the same life for the 5th time. I had experienced burning to death, guillotine, hanging and being stabbed to death. And all my tragic endings were related to one person, my stepsister Rochelle. Today was the day Rochelle's mother married my father, Duke Cecil. It was the end of my pampered heiress life. After experiencing everything for 4 times, I knew I was not the loved pampered heiress I thought I was. I was just a tool to connect 2 most powerful families on the continent. Father did not love me. If Rochelle, who was more docile, more beautiful and more well-tempered, could replace me, then so be it. With Rochelle as a comparison, I was just a disappointment. Someone who was known to have a bad temper, an airhead who only knew to spend money. As time went by, I was just someone who brought disgrace to the family. They would have disowned me if their pride allowed them to. I had been a childish, spoiled heiress through and through in my 1st life. I had looked down on Rochelle. I thought she was just a silly country girl with no manners. She would never be on the same par as me. She would even make me look superior. I had been childish like that. But I was wrong. I was the one acting as a stepping stone for Rochelle. Rochelle had perfect manners and temperament as opposed to my well-known bad temper. Rochelle was a beauty, whereas I was just someone with pleasing features. Rochelle had more talents in magic than me. Rochelle shone in every aspect while I shivered in her shadows. This was not what I had expected. I was not supposed to be the one hovering in the shadows. My pride could not take that. I had been brimming with envy. When even my fiancé fell for Rochelle and told my father he would like to marry Rochelle instead, that was the final straw. I became the evil villainess in every romance story. Looking back, I knew it was childish and not worth it. What I had been doing was just a pathetic joke to Rochelle. But did I deserve the way I met my death? To be burnt alive on a stake in front of everyone? Do you know how painful it was to be burnt? Do you know how it felt to smell the way your skin and tissues turning to ashes? Do you know the despair of knowing your life being burnt away bit by bit? I had never harmed anyone physically. It was all just angry words and hysterical fits like every pampered spoiled heiress who threw their tempers. The worst I did was trying to cheat in an attempt to win her in a magic duel. I had been quite silly, really. That's how I had fallen into the trap of one of Rochelle's suitors and ended my tragic life. And started this never-ending hell. When I realized I had been reborn in my 2nd life, I had been brimming with hatred and anger. I had wanted revenge. So much that my 2nd life had ended much more quickly than my 1st. I learned from my previous deaths. I decided to avoid Rochelle and her strings of suitors at all cost in my 3rd life. Rochelle was like the protagonist in a story. The gods were all on her side, as well as strings of suitors who would do whatever Rochelle told them to do or hinted them to do. I lived the longest that life. In my quest to avoid Rochelle at all cost, I ran away from home and smuggled across the sea to the continent that hated people from our continent. After 7 years, I thought I could finally stop hiding in fear in a foreign country. I thought I could return to my home country. I had planned to settle in a tiny villa in the countryside. As soon as I had bought my tiny villa, I was captured. I had been told my father, whom I had not been in contact with for years, was planning treason all along, and I must be helping out my father in secret. As for my dear stepsister, who had been the perfect daughter to my dear father all throughout the years, of course she knew nothing of that sort. She was as pure as snow. She was innocent. I had been told that my punishment got even worse in the attempt of slandering the sacred Empress Rochelle, as expected of the evil stepsister who bullied Rochelle. I had no idea how I became the evil stepsister when I ran away as soon as Rochelle entered the scene. I was hanged. I threw away my own pride in my 4th life. I could no longer bear this never-ending reincarnation. I thought if I could die nicely like normal people, the torture would end. I pretended to be the best sister. Whatever Rochelle wanted, I gave it to her. I was even her best friend. I threw away myself in the process. I was just a puppet doing all of Rochelle's biting. It all ended when a devastated lady, whose childhood sweetheart dumped her for Rochelle, came rushing into our tea gathering in hysterics with a knife. Rochelle had hidden behind me just in time and I was stabbed. I never saw it coming. I had been busy serving Rochelle tea. I could not even utter a protective spell. Thinking back to all my failed attempts to live, I had little hope for my fifth life. That was when Sarah rushed into the room and cried, "They have arrived, Lady Odette. I should stop lying on my bed. I should start facing my fifth life. Let's make this life my last. Let's die for real this time." "Odette," Rochelle said with a tiny blush on her face. Her voice turned softer as her confidence wavered, like she was scared of me. "Can I call you Odette? I hope it's not too forward of me, but I really want us to be close sisters." "Odette." She smiled docilely with her misty lavender eyes. Before I could say anything, Father said, "Of course you can, Rochelle. We're all family." He smiled dotingly at her and eyed me meaningfully. I took a sip from my cup of tea and smiled. "Of course, Rochelle. We're all family." The wedding yesterday went by peacefully. Rochelle became the talk of capital with her stunning red dress, showing off her porcelain white complexion and deer-like lavender eyes. I chose a simple dark blue dress, no longer stupid enough to think I could put her down by wearing a similar dress like what I had done in my first life. I decided to stay as an innocent bystander for now. I would no longer run away. It's proven not effective. I would no longer throw away myself and my pride just to please Rochelle. All that led to was me being used as a shield when danger came. Came to think of it, my time acting as an antagonist to Rochelle in my second life was the happiest among my 4 lifetimes. Maybe I should consider acting as a villain again? Best live happily than to suffer if I had to repeat this over and over again. I knew it's not Rochelle's fault. She was just simply blessed by gods. And I was the one in the wrong, even if in the end I received more punishment than I deserved. I admitted I was just not a good-natured girl. I liked comparing myself with people around me and became a bitter, unlikable monster when people turned out to have it better than me. I never once appreciated what I already had. Thanks to someone pointing that out in one of my past lives, I had become very familiar with my own fault. I decided to just follow the flow of life for now. "Odette, what are you doing today? Let's hang out together. If you don't mind, of course." Rochelle smiled shyly. "I don't know anyone here." "Odette, bring Rochelle with you. Go meet some friends," Father commanded. "Hannah is having a tea party tomorrow. I'll bring Rochelle with me." I remembered Hannah's tea party. No matter what I changed, how I behaved, Hannah's tea party was an event that never changed. Rochelle would be humiliated there. No matter how hard I tried stopping the humiliation from taking place, it was like a fixed plot in a novel. It would always appear right along the track it was supposed to take place. If I did not partake, the head of the group of people who humiliated Rochelle would become the heiress of another prominent family. If I took the side of Rochelle and tried to defend her, my well-worded defense would be turned around, so it seemed like I was subtly making sarcastic comments at Rochelle. Same rumors about how I hated my stepsister would spread the next day. I tried hiding once so that I would not be involved in the humiliation altogether. When I returned, Rochelle would blink her watery deer-like eyes and stared at me with silent condemnation. Everyone with eyes would then start to think I was the one ordering my friends to do this. There's no getting away from this. No matter what I did, 2 things would come out of this tea party. Rumors would spread about me hating Rochelle, and Rochelle would be saved from humiliation by one of her suitors. From my experience with my last life, I could still be friends with Rochelle after this incident, but whether if she had been secretly hating on me, I had no idea. What should I do this time? What if I didn't bring Rochelle to the tea party? In some lives I was forced by Father to take her there, and after a while I conceded because I wanted to humiliate her in the party like the evil stepsister I was. In other lives, I thought without me instigating the farce, the humiliation would not have taken place. Of course not. I knew better now. There were some major events that must happen no matter what. They were like cornerstones of a building. Like the tea party where Rochelle must be humiliated and thus meeting one of her suitors. Wait, suitors? Come to think of it, all those cornerstones involved Rochelle and her strings of suitors in some ways or other. Could I change that? What if Rochelle was not able to meet her suitor number 1 in the tea party? Suitor number 1 was Lord Hank, the son of a duke. That duke was a powerful priest serving the god of thunder. Our country had different temples serving different gods. Every noble family had a god they served. The nobles sent their offspring to study in the temples. The offspring that were chosen would become the priests or priestess of that temple. Usually the process of choosing priests and priestess involved them battling each other with their magic. People in our continent, unlike those living on the continent across the sea, could practice sorcery or magic which become more specialized after learning in a temple. Most of our country's power was divided and held among the priest and priestess of different temples. That's why aristocrats always sent their children to the temples, in the hope that their children would become a priest or priestess. By coming to power, their family would also become more powerful. My family once had hope for me, but sadly I was not particularly gifted in magic. That's why in the end they turned to the more talented Rochelle even if she was not family by blood. Back to Lord Hank. He was actually betrothed to Lady Florence from a young age and words had it that they were getting along really well, but he fell in love at first sight with Rochelle. Lady Florence was one of the priestess candidates for her god. On the day the final choosing had taken place in my previous lives, a letter that Hank had written about breaking their betrothal reached her. This affected her badly. She had been injured in the process and had lost the match. She did become a priestess, second in command to her opponent, but her face was scarred after that match. It's really a tragedy. What if Hank didn't meet Rochelle in the tea party? Then Florence would not be distracted in her choosing a few days later. Their betrothal would end one way or another. Hank would meet Rochelle sooner or later and fall in love. But what if I could delay their meeting until Florence's choosing was over? It's really not worth it losing your place and your face for some fickle guy. But how could I stop this tea party from happening? Lady Odette, where are you going? Sarah, my maid, shrieked in horror as she saw me climbing out of the window. Shush. I muttered a spell to stop Sarah from rousing the whole estate to watch me running from home in the middle of the night. Sarah wanted to speak again, but found she was not able to. She frowned disapprovingly at me and mouthed, Lady Odette, it's nearly midnight. Yeah, I know. That's why I am choosing to sneak out now. I rolled my eyes and then I muttered a sleeping spell before Sarah muttered one at me. Sarah collapsed on the floor. Sleep tight. See you tomorrow. I climbed out of the window in my bedroom and jumped down. As soon as I jumped down, I muttered a simple wind spell to control my descent. The god my family served was the god of wind. I was sent to the wind temple when I was 10. Father expected me to at least grab a priestess position, not the higher ranking one, just a lowly one. But I could not even do that. I could master simple wind-related spells, but more complex and advanced ones? I couldn't master them as well as my teachers and father wanted, but simple wind spells were enough for me to plan my escapade. In order to get away from going to the tea party, I needed to prepare a potion. A potion to make me look like I was feverish and sick. Very sick. A potion even healers could not discover I was faking it. Why did I know the arts of God of Darkness? From my second life where I really turned into a villainess through and through. You thought I used it on Rochelle? Of course not. Due to the laziness of a certain someone, I had to do the work of the Priestess of Darkness. I could remember the ingredients for that potion and that's because I made more than 20 of them during that time. I pulled the hood over my head to make sure it covered my face and walked quickly to the forest near my estate. The ingredients for the potion were just common herbs. I should be able to find them in the forest. After a few hours, I had finally collected all the ingredients I needed. I was stretching out my cramped limbs when I noticed a crow staying on the branch of the tree next to me. It tilted its head when it saw me looking at it and then cawed. It then flapped its wings and flew away. When it flew by me, a black crow feather fluttered down and landed next to my leg. I picked it up. The feather seemed to have a subdued golden hint when I flickered it under the moonlight. It can't be. No, that's not possible. I laughed dryly. Even though I did not believe the crow just now was really that crow, I placed the feather in my pocket. Just in case. Just in case. I patted my pocket for good measure. Odette, Sarah said you had fallen sick. Father eyed me with doubt in high. I had tried pretending to be sick quite a few times when I was small. The good old times when I was still naive and young. No doubt father was considering the odds of me faking ill so I did not have to bring Rochelle to the tea party. What a surprise that my father was totally correct this time. But sadly he would not be able to uncover the truth. Father, I am not feeling quite well. I might need a healer. I sneezed. Please tell Rochelle I am so sorry I could not bring her to the tea party. I sneezed again. The invitation. Sarah, bring me the invitation. Please don't let me hold Rochelle back. Maybe Rochelle can go on her own. Rochelle must be so disappointed. I brushed the non-existent tears from my eyes. The door pushed open at that moment with Rochelle rushing in. Odette, how are you feeling? You look feverish. Oh dear, how are you feeling? Dear Odette? Rochelle cried with worries. Her lavender eyes began to grow misty, just as I had predicted. Rochelle must come rushing in to visit me. It's true that your enemy was the one who knew you best. Rochelle, I am so sorry. The invitation is here. It seems like you have to go on your own. It's such a pity. I thought I could accompany you to your first tea party. I sighed and dabbed my eyes with a handkerchief. Don't be, Odette. It saddened me that you're suffering now. Tears seemed to be about to fall from Rochelle's eyes. She squeezed my hands as she said this. Rochelle, I pretended to be really touched. I did learn something from my last life. My acting greatly improved. I knew just how to act to look like we were great and loving sisters. The kind my father would be very pleased with. When in truth, I just wanted to barf. Could you believe you had such deep feelings for someone you had only known for one day? Rochelle, don't let me hold you back. It's nearly time for the tea party. Go and prepare. I waved my handkerchief in the direction of the door. Father nodded dotingly at Rochelle. You heard what your sister said. Go and prepare. Fighting back the urge to roll my eyes at this display of fatherly love, I waited for Rochelle to turn it down. Kind-hearted Rochelle would never leave her ill sister in her sick bed alone while she went out to play. No, I am not going, Rochelle cried. How can I leave my sister here alone when I am enjoying myself? I won't be able to forgive myself. I am going to stay here and take care of Odette, as expected of Hera's daughter, Father said. A look of approval appeared on his face. Odette, learn something from your sister. Get some rest. Then he walked out of the room, as expected from my father. Here it came. From now on the two of us would always be compared. While Rochelle shone till the end, by comparison I would always be the incompetent one. Odette, do you want a cup of hot tea? Rochelle smiled lovingly. That'll be great. I smiled back. Now I just had to keep Rochelle at home till Lady Florence completed her final choosing. Lord Hank, you might just have to wait a tiny bit longer to meet your one true love. I smirked as I took a sip of tea. The invitation for Lady Florence's celebration party was sent to our estate a week after that. Father thought this would be the perfect opportunity for Rochelle's entrance into the society. He demanded that I brought Rochelle with me now that I had recovered from my severe cold. I found this cruel to Lady Florence. Lord Hank falling in love with Rochelle on her own celebration party? But I could not pretend to fall sick again, could I? The same trick again would get old. And there was another problem. The crow feather I brought back from the forest really did shimmer and golden when flicked under the sun. This meant the crow I met that night was really that crow. Why was that crow so far away from home? It should be as lazy as its owner. It should not be of matter to me. We did not know each other in this life. That's right. I should just pretend I didn't see that crow. I should just burn the feather. My contemplation was cut short when Sarah rushed into my room and shouted excitedly. Guess what, Lady Rochelle was robbed on the street. What? Where are the servants? That certainly didn't happen in the past few lives. What if they thought it's my doing again? Lady Rochelle saw some orphans on the street, so she bought a loaf of bread with money from her own purse and ordered her maid and the coachman to distribute them. She was also handing out money when she was robbed. I see. I rubbed my temple with my fingers. That's certainly something Rochelle would do. It's a miracle she was not robbed more often. Is she injured? Of course not. Here comes the most exciting part. Lord Hank saved her. Lady Rochelle was obviously shocked and frightened, so Lord Hank escorted her back. He was still downstairs in the drawing room. Chuckles escaped my throat while Sarah looked at me worriedly. And here I was so worried that the two might ruin Lady Florence's celebration party. The first day I let Rochelle out of the estate, she immediately bumped into Lord Hank. There's really no escaping this. Maybe in a moment, words would spread about how I hired thieves to scare the poor Rochelle. I decided to stop caring anymore. Let the words spread. But in this life I had finally changed the fate of Lady Florence. She should not waste her time with this fickle fiancé. I did not want another silly girl to turn into an evil villainess just because her fiancé betrayed her. Just like how I had been in my first life. It's just not worth it. If I could save them because I knew exactly where everything was heading, why not? That night Rochelle came into my room and told me her great adventure today. When she mentioned Lord Hank, her face blushed as she waved her hand excitedly describing how heroic Lord Hank was. She acted just like a young girl falling in love with someone for the first time. That was Rochelle. For every suitor, she acted as if she liked him or even loved him. Every single time it's this blush and look of admiration as well as adoration in her lavender eyes. When I was pretending to be her best sister in my previous life, I asked her if every suitor was to propose who would she choose. And she said she could not choose. Sometimes I wonder if she really loved any one of them or if she's actually not capable of love at all. Odette, I think I should express my thanks to Lord Hank. He's such a nice gentleman. He knew I was frightened. He even escorted me back. You didn't see how heroic he was at that time. I felt so safe in his embrace. All I could do was nod with a fake smile on my face. Do you know what kind of gift he might like? That I am not sure. I am not really familiar with him. I am sorry, Rochelle. I smiled apologetically. What do you think if I bake some cookies? Do you think he would like it? Whatever you do, I have no doubt he will love it. I muttered beneath my breath. It's your gratitude that's most important, I said with another fake smile. I'll go find a recipe. Lord Hank said he would show me around town tomorrow. That's really nice of him, isn't it? Absolutely. So Lord Hank didn't even pause to think of his betrothed for 1 second and went on and set up a date? After Rochelle left my room in a rush, I wrote a note to Lady Florence with sprawled handwriting so that it could not be traced back to me. That night I sneaked out again. When I reached Lady Florence's estate, I realized a huge problem. How could I send this note to Florence without waking up anyone? Now I missed Isabel, my cat familiar I kept in my second life. If Isabel was here, the note could be sent out easily. In my third and fourth lives, I had thought of raising Isabel again, but decided against it. I couldn't bear separating with something I liked dearly and then losing them when I had to start over again. Only I remembered the past memories, but not one of them. They were no longer the ones I met in my previous life. Adding to the fact I would not cross path with Isabel with the current path I was taking. I smiled bitterly. I hoped Isabel met a nice owner this life. Now I had to sort out the current problem. How could I place this note in Florence's room without alerting anyone? Using magic was kind of risky. Estates usually had spells placed around the premise to detect unfamiliar magic. You can come out. A voice ranged out in front of me. I can feel you there. I mean you no harm. It's Florence. She was out alone with just a cloak over her nightgown. I am a priestess for the goddess of hope. I can feel your intense despair and wish for hope. So that's what gave me away. I was careless. But now that she was here, all I had to do was to give her the note. I fling the note out like a dart. It landed a few inches from her feet. Then I turned around, melting into the darkness. Intense despair and wish for hope? Could she feel my intense wish for death? I nearly laughed at my own cruel joke. Words of Lady Florence breaking off her betrothal with Lord Hank spread soon after that. Odette, how could Lady Florence break off her betrothal with Lord Hank? Rochelle complained with anger. Lord Hank is such a nice gentleman. He is a powerful sorcerer, but yet he's so kind to the weak. Lord Hank is so devastated with the news. He was so sad when we met yesterday. I just continued with reading the book on my lap while nodding noncommittally. In my note, I told Florence about how Lord Hank offered to take Rochelle around town. I asked her to observe in the dark with her own eyes. It's totally up to her to decide if she still wished to proceed with the betrothal or if it's better to break everything off before it turned into a huge scandal. From what I knew, what hurt Florence so badly in my previous lives was because her opponent had goaded her about her fiancé's new love just before their duel, telling her no wonder her fiancé chose a beauty like Rochelle instead of her. Her opponent had told her it had been a known secret among the aristocrats, except her, because her family blocked the news from her to avoid distracting her. At that exact moment, as if it was a scheduled plan, Lord Hank's servant had brought her a letter from Lord Hank about the broken betrothal. There was not an ounce of respect for her nor her family. Florence was a girl known for her sensibility. If she had the chance to see how Lord Hank treated Rochelle and compared that to how he treated her, she would know how to react. All of Rochelle's suitors looked at her in similar ways. The doting look, the honey-dripping glance. It's very easy to distinguish the difference between you and Rochelle. There's no chance getting in between them. The best way was to break off everything before gossips broke. Oh, poor Lord Hank. Rochelle sobbed. How I wish I could comfort him. Lord Hank was 100% pretending in front of Rochelle so that she could go and comfort him. I can comfort him. He has been so nice to me. Now it's the time I repay him. Rochelle clapped her hands excitedly. Odette, I'm sorry I have to leave now. I gave her an elegant smile and waved my hand. I was trying hard to suppress my urge to shout, just leave. Do you think I want to hear about your love life? At her. She rushed out of the room soon after that. As soon as she left the room, I rolled my eyes and flopped down on the armchair, covering my face with the book I was reading. Now what comes next? I thought. There are some events that always happen in all of my previous lives. Let's call them cornerstones. Meeting Lord Hank in the tea party being one of them. In this life I intervened a bit, but fate still drew the two of them together. Now what's the next cornerstone? Must be the meeting with my stupid fiancé. I sat up. The book I placed over my face fell to my lap. With that, the golden black crow feather I tucked in the book also fluttered to my lap. I should have burnt this. As I muttered beneath my breath, I slipped the feather back into my leather-bound book. It's about time Father sent me back to the temple. Originally, sending Rochelle to the Wind Temple was not even on Father's mind. But then Father's new wife stepped in and said Rochelle had dreams of becoming a priestess ever since she was small. She believed that's a prophecy of some kind. Or else why would Rochelle kept having the same dream ever since she was 4? Father was totally convinced. If Odette had little hope of becoming a priestess, what about Rochelle? So Rochelle would follow me back to the temple in a few weeks. My fiancé, Henri, came from a family also serving the god of wind. That's where Rochelle met him. I didn't know about Rochelle, but that's where Henri fell in love with her. Rochelle could not catch up with her study, so she asked for my help. In my first life, being the evil stepsister I was, I of course kicked her away after some sort of humiliation. In the end, it was Henri tutoring her. And then Henri told me he had to break off our betrothal as he fell deeply in love with Rochelle. See the pattern here. Rochelle met a guy. That guy fell deeply in love and then broke off the betrothal. Wherever Rochelle went, she left behind a strings of broken hearts. Broken hearts of girls. After burning to death in my first life, I had reflected. Did I really like Henri that much? Had he really been worth it? Or had I been so fixated on him just because Rochelle once again stole something from me and I had just been jealous? Had it all been because of my silly pride? When I saw Henri for the first time in my second life, I realized I really felt nothing for him except for the anger and hatred for plotting my death with the other suitors. I felt not an ounce of jealousy when he was with Rochelle, even when they were flirting around. That's when I realized I really didn't like Henri as much as I had thought. It's all my silly pride. Thank gods I don't like him. I rolled my eyes as I muttered beneath my breath. How can my taste be this bad? In my previous life in which I pretended to be the best sister alive, whatever Rochelle wanted, I gave it to her. That's why when Henri announced that he was going to break off our betrothal in a family gathering with both of our families all seated around a table, I had acted like a heartbroken yet understanding ex-fiancé and then accepted the sad truth that Henri wanted to marry Rochelle instead graciously. This had earned me an approving nod from father. But the fact that Henri had dumped me in front of everyone and then declared he would marry my stepsister instead was a huge insult to me. No wonder I lashed out in my first life when I was still childish and spoiled. Now that I thought of it, anger seemed to build up in my body. Do you know how insulting that was? How humiliating when your supposed acquaintance all silently pointed their fingers behind your back and mocked you. No, I won't let that happen to me again. I swore to gods internally. Then how about we speed things up? My lips could not help but to quirk up for this upcoming drama. Odette, I heard lately you have been hiding in your room reading, father stated disapprovingly. In the past he had always asked me to study more. Now I was hiding in my room all day reading. He disapproved. All I wanted to do was to roll my eyes. To be frank, my personality had changed quite drastically after 4 lives and he didn't even suspect anything. I wanted to applaud my father for being so insensitive, but now it's the time to set my plan to motion. Odette, when you return to the temple next week, Rochelle will follow you, father announced. We can be together. Odette, I am so happy. Rochelle, who was sitting next to me, grabbed my arm excitedly. Really? I pretended to be shocked. Do you know Rochelle has been busy studying to prepare herself? And what are you doing? Reading trashy romance novels all day. Have you even practiced during the break? So Rochelle reading a book was studying, while if it's me then it's reading trashy romance novels? It's true that once someone had a fixed perception of a person, it never changed. I did not know why I still felt a hint of disappointment. It's been 4 lives. Wake up, Odette. I will start studying with Rochelle. Father, Hera, father said to my new stepmother lovingly, your daughter is really a good influence. You raised a good daughter, while the one I have. He glanced at me disapprovingly. Once father and Hera left the room, Rochelle started to cling her arm around mine. Don't be sad, Odette. Father just did not understand your desire to relax a bit. She gave me a smile that was meant to soothe me. Let's study together. I can't wait for us to study in the temple together. It's going to be so fun. She grinned joyously. I nodded. Even though I did not want to stay in the same room with Rochelle for one more second, it's necessary for my future plans. Odette, can you show me how to do this grade 1 wine spell? Rochelle asked hesitantly while blushing. Let me think about it. I took a look at the spellbook in her hand and then cradled my head in my hands to pretend I was thinking hard. Let me try. I of course created a mess of the spell. It ended with a poof and the power of the wind generated was even weaker than fanning yourself with your hand. Ops. I pretended to be embarrassed. I am sorry, Rochelle. I am such a bad study partner. That's the 6th spell I have failed. I covered my face with my hands. It's all right, Odette. These are hard spells. They're not. They might look hard to Rochelle at the moment. That's because she had just finished basic sorcery with an average teacher from the countryside she was from. Once she started learning the more advanced tricks, she'd soak them all up and overtake me in no time. That's what happened in every life I had experienced. She was a genius. Not just with wind magic, but all kinds of magic. Of course it was said that the treasure she discovered in the Wind Temple later on helped her, but she was definitely a genius to begin with. Rochelle, I know who we can ask for help. I am such a bad study partner, but I know someone that suits the job. I clapped my hands. Just you wait. I will find you a great study partner tomorrow. I then ran out of the room. It's best not to spend too much time with Rochelle. It's suffocating. When I returned to the room, I dug out a note I had written a few days ago from the drawer and handed it to Sarah. Send this to Lord Henri. Lady Odette, you're finally contacting Lord Henri. Sarah brightened. I was so worried. I thought you two had a fight. You haven't asked me to send notes to him for a few weeks. Since the wedding of the Duke. Of course, that's the time point I was reborn. Who wanted to play exchange love letters with Henri? When I was young, I thought exchanging love letters was such a romantic thing. I wrote letters after letters to Henri. All I got in return was, really, that sounds interesting. I still thought that's because Henri was not good with words. That illusion shattered when I came across a love letter he wrote to Rochelle. There's never someone who's not good with words, just someone you didn't want to talk to. How naive I was. I shivered at the flashbacks of my naive and airhead self. I flopped onto my bed with my leather-bound book and continued reading it. Just send the note. I waved my hand to send Sarah away. Rochelle, I have found you a great study partner. I peeked into the library we used for study. Odette, here you are, Rochelle cried. She looked as pretty as always. The morning sunlight shone on her lavender eyes, making them sparkle like amethysts. Perfect. Rochelle, this is Henri. I led Henri into the library. He is a fellow pupil studying in the Temple of God of Wind. I could see Henri visibly stiffened as he laid eyes on Rochelle. Perfect. Henri, this is my sister Rochelle. She is going to be a pupil in the temple as well. I dragged out a chair from across Rochelle and ushered Henri to sit. Well, we have several questions regarding spells. I am sure you'll be so glad as to teach us. I tried to imitate the sweet bubbly tone I had when I faced Henri when I was young. Oh, how silly of me. What are we missing? Snacks. I'll be back in a moment. Or not. I chuckled as I sneaked out of the library as quickly as I could. When I was closing the door, I could hear Henri telling Rochelle in slight embarrassment, Odette might not return. Why? I could imagine Rochelle widening her deer-like eyes with just this reply. It's her common trick. She hated studying, Henri sighed. She won't be back. You said you had some spells you want to ask about? Oh, yes. I sneaked back into my room and lay back onto my fluffy four-poster bed. I took the leather-bound notebook from below my pillow and muttered as I was twirling the crow feather I kept between the pages, who said I hated studying. Look at what I am doing now. Reading a historical textbook. Lady Odette, Lord Henri has come. He's in the library, Sarah reported. I gave her a vague nod while flipping over a page of the leather-bound volume. Lady Odette, did you and Lord Henri really have an argument? You seldom go out of your room to meet him. That's because I don't want to meet him. I drawled as I rolled my eyes. But he's here to meet you. He cares for you so much to the point of coming here to tutor you. I chuckled at this totally incorrect news. All right, I will go and meet him later today. Now shoo, go prepare tea. I waved my hand to dismiss my nagging maid. Now after giving the lovebirds 5 days, it's more or less time Henri fell in love with Rochelle. Don't disappoint me, Henri. I smirked. Let's visit them after my tea. I creaked open the old oak door to the library and peeked inside. Both Henri and Rochelle were sitting side by side with their heads huddled close together over a spellbook. Rochelle was so focused that a lock of her shiny hair escaped her braids. The lock of hair fell in front of her eyes. Henri looked up and tucked that hair back behind her ear. Rochelle looked up with her face red as she smiled sweetly back at Henri, an exact copy of a scene out of a romance novel. I could not believe those romantic scenes in trashy romance novels, as my father so kindly categorized them, could happen in real life. I banged open the door to the library and shouted excitedly, I brought you guys snacks. Henri jumped at the sound of my voice and immediately leaned as far away from Rochelle as possible. He even started doodling on the paper in front of him. Odette, I was wondering where you were these few days. Rochelle said with her face still red. It's not the same without you studying with us. You said you would study with me. But you just never showed up. Leaving only Henri and me. Now I am back, with snacks. I grinned. You see there's tea, cookies and, where are the cakes? I must have left them. Let me ask. I will go. Rochelle shot up from her seat and then rushed out of the room. Her face was still bright red. Ask Sarah to bring it over. I finished the sentence. I shrugged as I went to close the door of the library. Hi, Henri, so there's only the two of us left. I grinned. Well, yeah. Henri squirmed uncomfortably. Henri started to tidy up the table as he said, you should study, Odette. Rochelle is very talented. She caught up a lot during the past few days while you were playing around. Very soon, she will catch up and overtake you too, I thought silently. I know. Still grinning as I leaned on the wooden door of the library, you should thank me, Henri. Do you have fun studying with Rochelle? Just the two of you. What? Henri stuttered with his ears all red. Calm down, calm down. I am just saying you two seem to be good study partners, I stated innocently. Oh, Henri, you haven't mentioned the fact that you are my fiancé to Rochelle, have you? No, why should I? Henri squirmed uneasily. I understand. If you mentioned that tiny fact, Rochelle might not flirt with you. Totally understandable. What? We're not. It's all right. I tried to motion him to calm down. I am here for a deal. A deal you won't regret. My lips quirked up. Deal? Let's break off our betrothal. What? What are you playing at, Odette? Henri narrowed his eyes. It's a great deal. By breaking it off, you can flirt with Rochelle all you want. You can even marry her. Both of our families will agree. They just want someone from my family to marry someone from yours. Whether it's me or Rochelle, it doesn't matter. But it matters to you, am I right? Henri eyed me with distrust. But you like me, why would you give up like that? If you think by pretending to step back, I will fall for you. That's not going to happen, Odette. I know you, don't try to hurt Rochelle. I rolled my eyes. You don't know me. Not anymore. Well, there are certainly some conditions you have to follow. Conditions? I have to be the one to announce it. I dumped you, not the other way round. And you and Rochelle can only announce that you two are together or wed only after I have married. Not before my wedding. Sounds like a deal? I raised my eyebrow. Well, I might never marry though. Why are you doing this? He was still eyeing me skeptically. I just don't want to marry you, simple as that. Let's sign a contract. I took out a piece of paper from my sleeve. Then I can trust you. A contract? A magic one? Of course. We both have to swear to our gods. Do you want to go over your terms or not? I offered him the sheet. Rochelle is coming back any second. Once a contract was signed between two sorcerers, the two were bound by magic and their gods. They would face certain consequences if it's broken. The consequences were decided upon between the two parties before the contract was signed. In our case, the one who broke the contract had to be disowned by family. No one wanted to break a contract bound by magic as there were no loopholes around it. You're sealing your contract with you gods as witness. He quickly glanced through the paper and eyed me suspiciously one last time, clearly wondering why I was giving him up. But he knew this was his chance to freedom, so he bit his thumb and smeared his blood on the contract. He handed me the contract. I smiled and took out the needle I had with me. I pricked my thumb and followed his lead by smearing my blood on the contract. At the touch of my blood, the contract disappeared with only lingering black smoke. Henri stared in confusion. The smoke. What? You worry that I would fail a spell as simple as to draft a contract? You scrutinized the contract before signing, didn't you? The tiny crease between his eyebrows smoothed. Must be a trick of the light. I thought the smoke was black in color. Yes, I scrutinized the spell on the contract before signing. You did a surprisingly good job. It's now my turn to feel anger bubbling inside me. That's an elementary spell. Are you looking down on me? I gave him one final stare and walked out of the room. He was right about the smoke being black in color though. That's because the spell I used was from the Book of God of Darkness. If he broke the contract, it would not kill him. I was just an average sorceress to begin with. It'd just give him a day or two bad luck. I hummed as I returned to my room. Announcing to father about breaking off the betrothal had to wait until Rochelle showed her worth in the temple, but I was still glad to break off any connection with the stupid Henri. Now with our signed contract, Henri had to lay low when he was courting Rochelle. My happiness was built on him suffering as he watched Rochelle getting more and more suitors. He was the one who tricked me in my first life. Granted, I was stupid, but if he hadn't led me on, I wouldn't have fallen into that trap. Then I wouldn't have been burnt alive on a stake. Now it's just a little prank on him. If Henri was really Rochelle's true love, no matter how hard the process was, love would win, wouldn't it? Odette, I can't believe I get to study in the Wind God's temple. It's one step closer to my dream of becoming a priestess. How long does it take for us to go there? Will Henri come along with us? Rochelle said the last bit shyly. Around a day's journey on carriage, I said as Sarah helped me get into the carriage. As for Henri, from what I heard boys like to ride out there. I thought we're going with Henri, Rochelle said dejectedly, and then she clapped her hands excitedly. So we're going to spend the whole day sitting in the carriage together. That's great. I have a lot to ask you. Rochelle's eyes brightened. My head ached at the thought of staying in an enclosed area with Rochelle. Others might not know, but I who once acted as her best friend knew better. Rochelle was really talkative. I made sure I didn't have to stay with Rochelle during the journey, adding to the fact that this one-day carriage journey was in fact the cornerstone of Rochelle's life. Oh, you might think it's the common thieves jumping out to rob a young noble lady in the middle of nowhere, prince coming to save the day? No, it's Rochelle being kidnapped by a band of heroic outlaws and then they, or the leader of the band of outlaws, fell in love. In my first life, I of course did not go together with Rochelle. I hated my stepsister. How could I bear staying with her? I begged Henri to take me with him when he set out one day before. So when she was kidnapped, I was rumored to be the one conspiring it. And then in my fourth life, I was Rochelle's great sister. Of course I went with her. And then I was kidnapped with her. It's just a very bad experience. It felt like being a third wheel or someone transparent. Everyone was so focused on Rochelle. I could just run away if I could. They treated her like a queen. So, no, I decided not to go with Rochelle. I don't want to be kidnapped with her. I leaned out of the window of my carriage and grasped Rochelle's hand. I am sorry, Rochelle. I don't know you're so excited about us going together. I dabbed my dry eyes with my handkerchief. You see, I am planning to visit my mother's grave. It's a hilly and rocky road. I have some secrets I want to tell my mother. I hid my face behind a handkerchief like I was embarrassed. I am sorry, Rochelle. It's all right, she said in a fake cheerful tone, but I could see the dejection in her eyes. I know it's your first trip to the temple. You must be frightened. So Sarah is going with you. I smiled elegantly. Sarah widened her eyes and was about to refuse when I glared at her. So you have both Sarah and your maid to keep you company. Sarah can also tell you more about life in the temple. Odette, you don't have to. I will try to catch up with your carriage. Maybe we can meet on the road after lunch. That'll be great. Rochelle's face brightened. I'll set out first. I gave her a tiny wave as goodbye. Now that I had gotten rid of both Rochelle and Sarah, the buzzing around my ears finally stopped. You had no idea how noisy the two of them could get. I was gazing out of the carriage's window when I was passing through a forest. That's when I saw the carriage coming from the other direction. It was a carriage in the darkest shade of black. The horses pulling the carriage were also black. But what made it stood out was that there wasn't a coachman, just a crow standing on top of the carriage. When the sunlight shone on the crow, the black feathers glittered like gold. That couldn't be. That's the carriage of the priest of the god of darkness. The guard riding next to the carriage muttered anxiously. The coachman also drew our carriage to a stop. The guard knocked on the carriage's window and said, Lady Odette, why was he here? Shouldn't he be all the way in the north? He shouldn't be here. I did not remember him coming all the way down south at this time in my previous lives. But who knew? I didn't visit my mother's grave today in my previous 4 lives. Maybe he did come this far south and I did not know because I never ran into him. Stay calm. You two don't know each other. He is just a priest from another temple. Greet him and then he will be gone. This might be the only time in this life you get the chance to see him. Odette, find yourself lucky, I thought to myself. I asked the guard to open the carriage door and I got out of my carriage. I placed my right hand over my heart. With my left hand I lifted my dress to curtsy. My head slightly bowed. The common greeting for priests. When the carriage was getting closer and closer, I was suppressing my urge to look up and catch a glimpse of him through the window. That's when the carriage halted in front of me. Someone jumped down from the carriage and then my chin was tilted up. I widened my eyes as I took in his familiar lazy grin and the mask covering half of his face. See who I found on the road. A perfect candidate for serving the god of darkness. See who I found here. A perfect candidate for serving the god of darkness. The man from my memory had said. At that time, I had been kneeling in front of the temple of the god of darkness, praying that the god of darkness might assist me in my revenge. The huge wooden door of the temple had then swung open without a sound. Someone had stood in front of me saying nearly the exact same words. So it's you who raised me from my sleep, he had said. It has been a good nap. Are you coming in or not? He had looked at me with a lazy grin on his masked face. All I could see at that time was his lazy grin and bloody red eyes behind the mask. His expression at that time overlapped with the scene in front of me. When my eyes met his, realization finally dawned on me. It's really him, the high priest of the god of darkness. It's the first time I saw him after 2 lifetimes. The last time I saw him I was heading to my death. With a snap of his finger, my 2 guards and coachman went unconscious. I need some tea, he said nonchalantly as he swung around and returned to his carriage. When he settled down on the seat in his carriage, he asked, You want some? It's my pleasure, High Priest. I replied with an elegant smile. I returned to my carriage and dug out the hamper with a tea set. Water and tea leaves Sarah had placed in the carriage before I kicked her out of the carriage. I brought the stuff to his carriage and started to brew tea. When he said he wanted tea, he meant he wanted you to brew him tea. He was too lazy to do it himself. I placed the cup of warm tea on the low table in the carriage in front of him. The lazy grin was still on his face as he sipped the tea slowly as if he had all the time in the world. I need a spy. You seem to be a nice candidate, he said breezily as if he was merely talking about the weather. A spy? What did he need a spy for? If I remembered correctly, he was wandering around the temple with nothing to do all day in my second life. He as the high priest of the god of darkness was only called upon when the continent really needed him, such as at times when the beasts in the forest near the border became uncontrollable and required priests from every temple to join forces. You can do it, can't you? He said with a smile on his face, his ruby red eyes piercing at me. For what? I am just a pupil in the temple of God of Wind. I know, he grinned. It doesn't suit you. You're more well suited as a pupil of the god of darkness. Your soul reeks of darkness. That's what he had told me in my other life too. He said I had such a bad personality that I would probably suit learning the arts of Dark God more. I was too easily driven by jealousy. I want you to spy on the treasure your temple holds so dear. Oh, don't try to play dumb now. I know you know there's a treasure kept in your temple. It's no surprise he knew about the treasure. From what I gathered in my previous life, most temples seem to have one. They're all shards of some jewel. In every life. Soon after Rochelle started studying in the temple, she would break some sort of wards that sealed the shard in the temple. The jewel shard acknowledged her as its only owner. This sort of boosted up her power. Rochelle then went on a journey collecting other shards from other temples. Of course, the other temples did not want Rochelle taking away their well-guarded treasure. This led to a huge debate and battle between Rochelle and the other temples. You want me to steal it? I asked hesitantly. That's an impossible mission for me. I couldn't fight Rochelle. Of course not. His grin widened. Why would I want that shard? It has no use to me. You just have to track her progress. Her progress? When she collected one shard, report to me. It's simple, isn't it? I nodded. Great. Now let me give you a gift. You're doing work for me. I should give you some reward. He whistled and then his crow peeked in from carriage window. I am finding your friend. His crow had a friend? But he only had one crow familiar. I was getting more and more confused. He was the same as before, but I did not understand his actions. I did not remember him getting particularly fixated on those shards in the past. He seemed more interested on my attempts to take revenge. Meow. Meow. A black kitten jumped in from the carriage window. She had sleek black fur with golden eyes. Isabel? The cat landed on the lap of the high priest and she purred as he patted the kitten. Your owner, he said as he placed the kitten on my lap. My gift for you. What? What's the cat's name? Guess? The kitten looked exactly like Isabel. Her appearance, the way she purred when I touched it, the way she snuggled on my lap. Without thinking, I called out, Isabel? Meow. Meow. She responded as if she had done that many times before and then started licking my fingers. Just like how Isabel had been in my second life. I glanced up to see the familiar lazy grin still hanging on his face. At that moment, the crow with golden black feathers flew in. It landed on the priest's shoulder as it cawed. It's nearly time. The carriage door opened by itself. Send words to me through Isabel. It's a pleasure meeting you. It's my pleasure too. Your Grace. I climbed out of the carriage with Isabel in my arms. That's when I felt his colder than average human's breath trickling by my ear. See you soon. Odette. I was still standing in the same place when my guards and coachman began to wake from his deep sleep. I looked at the kitten in my arms. This kitten was definitely Isabel. It couldn't be. The high priest created an illusion. All my guards and coachmen believed that the black carriage drove by as we greeted him like it's supposed to. All the better. It's best not to alert father. I told them I found Isabel by the side of the street and was going to keep it. Without Sarah here to reject the idea, they all accepted it. Another whim of Lady Odette. What's new? The journey went on smoothly after that. I arrived at the temple just before sunset. When I got out of my carriage, I saw Henri getting on his horse. When he saw me, he stopped and rushed towards me and cried, Rochelle was kidnapped. How did that happen? I asked anxiously. Do you know who did it? I should have accompanied her. How could I tell my father about this? It's all my fault. I cried in horror. It's Chris and his merry band. Chris and his merry band? Who are they? Did they leave any sort of letter demanding money? It seemed like Sarah succeeded in escaping just as I had predicted. No, they didn't even leave a note. We wouldn't even know who did it if it's not for your maid and Rochelle's maid. They both escaped when their guards were low to call for our help. They left Rochelle there alone with the thieves? I shrieked angrily. They made the correct choice. It seems like Rochelle and the maids were kept in separate places. Their guards were low when compared to Rochelle. That's the only chance they had of sneaking out and calling for help. Luckily, Sarah knew the way to the temple. Then do you know where their nest is? I have to save Rochelle. We have already located her. We're setting out to rescue her now. The priests and I. We all think it best you stay here. We can't look after you when we're rescuing someone. So was that a subtle way of saying I'd be in their way? All right, I said in slight dejection. Please bring back Rochelle. Thank you, Henri. Henri gave me a nod and then rode on his horse to join the others in the rescue team. As expected, Sarah successfully escaped. As I said, their security was lax on people other than Rochelle. If my maid fought her way back to the temple to call for help, and gave them the location to save Rochelle as soon as possible, the suspicions on me might lessen a bit. It had become a huge news when Rochelle went missing for more than 3 days in my first life. No one could locate her. People began to suspect everyone, especially me. Now it's different. With the help of Sarah, they could very well rescue her by today. But then now there wasn't enough time for Rochelle and Chris to develop their romance. I hope I didn't mess things up. It'd be my fault if Chris really turned out to be her one true love. I returned to my bedroom in the temple. I laid on my bed, exhausted. It's been a long day. Isabel snuggled down on my pillow just like how it would in the past. I started running my hand on her sleek fur. I don't understand, Isabel. Why did you come under his care in this life? You should be a stray kitten in the village down the hill from the temple of God of Darkness. He would never have set foot in that village. And why did he know my name? Maybe I'm just overthinking it. Maybe he just has the power to know others' name. Maybe he eavesdropped. Maybe he just knows. But that tone, that gesture. Arg. I must be overthinking. I buried myself deep in the pillow to hide my burning cheeks and ears. A few hours after dinner, Sarah came knocking. They have brought back Lady Rochelle. Really? Bring me to her. Let's finish the last scene of this drama. When I reached Rochelle's room, Henri was comforting her. He had his arm around her shoulders and speaking softly to her. Luckily I had the audacity to peek before barging in. I rolled my eyes. I had my fair share of barging into romantic moments in my previous lives. It's embarrassing and I really wanted to wash my eyes after viewing those lovey-dovey moments firsthand. I retreated back to the corridor and stomped on the ground a few times to pretend to be rushing to her room. Before opening the door I was already crying out, "Rochelle, poor Rochelle, how are you? Are you all right?" When I rushed into the room, Rochelle came over to give me a huge hug. She cried, "Odette, you must be really worried. Rochelle, it's all my fault. If I accompanied you, you wouldn't have to experience this." I sobbed into my handkerchief. I should have soaked my handkerchief in mint so that I could cry whenever I wanted. Those trashy kidnappers. Oh my poor Rochelle. Did you get hurt? Of course not. Odette, you have no idea. They are actually heroes. You see, the lord overseeing this land is overbearing and strict. The villagers have to pay high taxes and they have nothing to eat. Chris and his men were actually planning to kidnap the lord's daughter so that they could negotiate with the lord and help the villagers. They are heroes. You sure they are heroes, Rochelle? They kidnapped people. They were planning to threaten the lord with his daughter. I lost all hope in talking sense to Rochelle a long time ago, so I just sat there with my usual elegant smile and nodded. Rochelle continued on with her great adventure when at last Henri got her attention and I was finally able to sneak away. That night, I was falling asleep when I realized if I had to report Rochelle's progress of collecting the shards to him, did that mean I had to follow her around? I could not deal with talkative Rochelle nor her suitors anymore. Maybe I could just follow her from afar? That's definitely a better plan.